Good evening, everybody. This is the story of a young social worker whose name is Nasreen. And it goes back to sometime in the late 1980s when Nasreen had completed her post graduation in social work and she was about to start working in poor slum communities in the city of Bombay. These slum communities didn't have any infrastructure. They had no water, no electricity, and the people who lived there were really very poor. Nasreen's education in social work had given her kind of ideals which said that every citizen has a right to live with the minimum requirement for a, for a good quality of life. For at least that they should get 2 meals a day, they should get clean water, and that children can go to school and study. So there were some ideals in her mind. There were some ideas of, doing good and working for people. And when Nasreen began working in slums, what she found was that there was a lot of uh, there was a lot of Gundaism. There were people who were uh, better off. There were people who had muscle power, and they would bully the rest of the group who lived over there. Particularly, women and children were having a really terrible time. Women had to fetch water from long distances. Children didn't have enough food. There was no water for a daily bath. And in the midst of all this, the organization that Nasreen was working with decided to start a preschool for these children because this is where they could get at least 1 meal a day and have 2 hours of some kind of recreation and education, and that they would be in a safe place at least for 2 hours in the day. When Nasreen first began working, she had to meet with some of these muscle men who behaved as if they were committee members of that community. And as committee members, they actually used to take some money from all the families who stayed there. And they kept promising them that sometime in the near future, there would be electricity in their homes. They kept promising them that there would be water taps in the slum community. And this had been going on for some years and it never came. So when Nasreen began working with the preschool, she started meeting the mothers. The mothers would come to leave the children. To start with, this was a tribal community called Vadari Pada, and the Vadaris are tribes people who eke out a living by breaking stones. They actually work in stone quarries. And the place where they lived used to be a stone quarry, and all the stone had been exhausted because they had been working that quarry for so many years that now all the stone was exhausted. And the people who worked in these quarries started living there. And that is how this slum had come up. And as far as the government was concerned, this was supposed to be an illegal slum. So they didn't provide them with either water, nor toilets, or nor electricity. In front of the preschool, there was a, a 300 square meter patch, empty patch, barren. And many times, little children would use it just for, doing their toilet and so on. And the committee, the slum committee, those people, muscle men type of people, decided that they could sell this to the builders and make money out of it. When some of the mothers told Nasreen about this, she was extremely taken aback and also a little worried because the land on which the center was part of this 300 square meters plot. And she wondered what to do. Actually, it was a worrying situation. And the organization didn't want to get into a struggle with these people because these were not very savory people. These were not very good people. They had often been in police stations and so on for small time pickpocketing and for doing some petty thefts and things like that. And so the organization felt that we really shouldn't get involved with this. At the same time, we knew that if we didn't do something about this, then the children would suffer. The little children who were getting a small meal and the little children who were getting 2 hours of safe time in that center, those were the people who were going to really suffer. The mothers of the children came to Nasreen one day in a group and spoke to her and said, if this center goes away, it will be a big loss for us. During the time that our children are here, we are able to finish our cooking, fetch the water, and at least do some work while these little tots are with you. And we are so sure that they are safe over here, and we are so happy. And they also get their little milk and biscuits. And this is something that is, for us, it's a big thing. For poor people like us, it's a very big thing. Can you not please do something? Please do something to see that this center doesn't close. Um, well, Nasreen was just a social worker, so she had to report this back to her management committee in the NGO. And once again, the committee discussed it and they wondered what could be done. And so one of the committee members was, she was an enterprising lady. She also felt very strongly that something should be done, and she was the secretary of the organization. So she went to meet the local officers and found out that this piece of land did not belong to anyone to sell, that it was not to be sold at all, and it could not be sold. But now, how were we to talk to somebody and find out how the committee members planned to sell it? Because they didn't plan to sell it legally in any case. The way in which they wanted to do it, it was an illegal job and not a good thing to do. So, what was to be done? Well, mm, it was obviously that if we had to work with them, we would have to find some way also of tackling the way in which it was being done illegally. So the organization decided that why don't we at least try to put a fence around this land? And if anybody opposes us, then we'll say that we are putting a fence around this land so that our preschool is safe and because we don't want children to run onto the road and it's unsafe for them. And so we made all the arrangements with a contractor and Nasreen spoke to them. There was a large amount of money involved because, when you have to make a small wall and also some barbed wire and some things, that costs money. And of course, NGOs don't have much money. And this organization also had to think really hard. And then they decided to take the risk. And the risk was that if those committee members came in the way, and suppose they decided to pull this down while we were constructing, all the material would be lost and wasted. Imagine that. A small organization is putting together money from well-wishers and donors, and then they have to take a risk with that money. It was something that the NGO committee felt strongly about, and some of the members did not support the idea because they felt that this was a risk and they didn't know whether this meant, that we'd be spending money buying material, putting up something, and while it was being made, it would be pulled down. Would there be a fight? Would the police come in? And would these people who were ruffians and, not very savory characters, what would happen? And it was all a big question mark. But the decision became a little weak and the NGO committee wasn't too sure. And by this time, Nasreen was getting frustrated. She was beginning to feel, uh, oh, what will happen? And what will happen to the children? And I think, I think it's youth. I think what came forward in her mind was that nothing venture, nothing gain. So why not try to do something about it? And Nasreen told the NGO committee, why don't we just try to do this and let us see what happens? So we won't make a wall. Let's spend less money and let's try to only put up some barbed wire fencing just to fence it off. So I think with that idea, we proceeded. Nasreen also had some very good friends in another organization, and they knew all about the problems that she was facing in keeping this center running and going. And one of them was training to be a lawyer. And he came forward and said, on the day that you decide to put up this fence, I will come another with another two, three people, and we'll all stand with you and see who comes in the way and doesn't allow you to put up the fence. Oh, again, these were also young people. These were all 22, 23 youngsters. And at that time, nobody really knew what was going to happen and how. But I the day came, four of us were there. All the the rods and the barbed wire arrived, and putting up a barbed wire fence, it took just about 6 hours. But those 6 hours were really very tense. We wondered what would happen. We wondered if those ruffians would come. We wondered if there would be a fight. And there were some youth in the community who we thought will come forward. But when we went to look for them on that day, they said, oh no, this is a difficult situation for us. You please put up the fence, saying that the NGO is putting up the fence. But we live in this community. And if we were to see to support you, then later on these people may trouble us. So we can't really come forward. Nasreen still remembers that day and the 6 hours and the three friends who stood by her, and how the four of them passed those 6 hours with cups of tea and biscuits, and just kind of kept an eye on the two laborers who were working. And oh well, the barbed wire fence came up, no ruffians came, there was no fight, there was no police, and we actually had the fence up by the end of the day, around that 300 square meters plot. And uh, it is a personal experience that Nasreen still remembers. And in her classes in community organization, she has made this into a small case study, and she also discusses it with the students in terms of that community organization is not something which is all fun and joy. That there are instances in this whole work where you may face a fairly risky situation, and you will have to use some resources. You may have to use some uh, I don't know, some gut feeling, and that it's not always going to be very rational and logical and like a planned project. Yes, the preschool was a planned project, but the way in which we put up the fence is something that remains in our minds for many, many years and even today. Thank you for listening to the story.